speak with us tonight. I think it's going to be a fun presentation. She grew up around Houston in the suburbs and became interested in agriculture. At Texas A&M, she was initially interested in agriculture education, but then she went to work at the university farm and kind of switched gears. She joined the Soil and Crop Sciences Department. She had the opportunity to study farming practices and crop genetics. Sounds like an easy thing, right? Crop genetics. She's always loved the outdoors and been interested in plants, so the degree was perfect for her. After her undergraduate degree, she pursued a master's in the Soil and Crop Sciences Department. During that time, she studied crop genetics, specifically focusing on a wilt pathogen that is prominent in the cotton plant. In August, she will begin studying science communications under Dr. Christy Daniel, who spoke to us a couple of months ago. And she hopes to work on a project focused on public perceptions of genetic modifications in agriculture. That sounds totally fascinating to me. So, Caitlin, thank you so much for being with us, and take it away.
Thank you. Thank y'all for having me. I'm really excited. And so I'm going to share my screen. And sorry.
Can I say one more thing that I forgot to say? Caitlin said she would be happy for us to leave our video on so she can see our faces, and this is going to be kind of interactive. You can leave your audio on if you are very quiet. Thank you, except when you're not supposed to be, but that's okay. Thanks. Sorry.
So I wanted to start out, well, with a discussion outline. So I'm going to do a little introduction of myself, more personal stuff, I guess, and then go into identifying some of the wildflowers, and then some planting and garden preparation, as well as how to troubleshoot some problems in your wildflower garden. And the picture I have to the right is of a yellow passion flower. So I'll start out from the top saying all or most of the information I got was from the Central Texas Gardener, and then I rented a bunch of books from the library, but this one helped me a lot in knowing the native flowers, wildflowers to the hill country. And so if you're interested in kind of fact checking me a little bit, this would be a great resource. And I live around Bulverde, so it's at the Bulverde Public Library. A little bit about me. So I just got married in January, and that's the picture you see to the top right. And this is actually a little bit of a funny story. So our friends are big pranksters, and someone planted a fake rat in the bathroom at our wedding venue. And so they brought it over to us and wanted to take pictures, and it was a fun time. And then the dog you see on the screen is our little puppy. We just got him in October, and his name is Scout. He's a plot hound, and you may hear him a little bit in the background, so I apologize for that from the get-go. And just as Lynn said, I worked in the cotton industry for a little bit at Texas A&M AgriLife, and I studied fusarium wilt on cotton. So most of my work was out of El Paso and a little bit out of Arizona, but I didn't do a whole lot of the traveling to Arizona, just kind of coordinating. And I am a tried and true Aggie, have always wanted to go there, and I absolutely love my time there. So we're gonna start out with a little bit of an activity. So can anybody name any of these wildflowers for me?
Gaillardia.
Sorry?
Gaillardia.
AKA Indian blanket.
Yes, that is correct. What about the middle one?
Antelope horn.
Antelope horn.
Yes, correct too. And then to the right?
Wine cup.
Wine
cups.
Awesome, y'all are off to a great start. And then we have 3 more for you.
Indian paintbrush. Are those Engelmann
Evening
daisies?
primrose.
They are Engelmann daisies, and the evening pink primrose is correct. So those are just a few of the ones we'll be talking about today. And so next we're gonna go into identifying some of these wildflowers and some of the ways that you can grow them. And something I'll say is I try to hit on the popular ones since that will probably be what most people wanna grow. And I know there were a lot of questions about more unique ones, and I won't get quite a chance to go over that. But anything that I talk about with the families, they'll be pretty similar. So I'm going to talk about lantanas and a particular milkweed. And so pretty much the growing techniques are the same as long as they're in the same family. So first up, of course, will be the bluebonnet. And you'll want to pay close attention because there will be something to identify some of these fun facts mentioned throughout the presentation. So right off the top, almost all of the wildflowers we're going to talk about are required for full sun, and they like kind of rockier, poorer soils. Actually, they thrive pretty well in them. And then you're going to want pretty minimal watering after establishment, as well as minimal fertilization. And so unless something's different, I probably won't mention that again, but just know that's pretty much what you'll want for each of these. So for bluebonnets, they can actually come in a variety of different colors, one being maroon for Texas A&M, and also obviously the blue that you normally see, and they can come in pink and purple and white shades as well. And so that's kind of interesting to me since, you know, when you think of a bluebonnet in the name, you think blue. But you want to plant these as seeds. Not many people have trouble planting with the seeds, and you want to plant in the last week of August to the first week of September. That's kind of your optimal time. Most of these wildflowers, if you're planting the seeds, you're going to want to plant from August to October. And then there's some that I'll name a little further, a little earlier than that. And then if you're doing transplants, you'll want to do early spring. So probably late March, early April, or sorry, late spring. So late March, early April. So a little bit more about bluebonnets is when you're planting them, if you're having a little bit of trouble getting them to germinate, well, one, look at the time that you're planting. So if you're not getting them in by that first week of September, it may be hard for them to sprout because the September rains are really what germinates the seed. But also, before putting them into the ground, damaging the seed coat a little bit through scarification is really important. It really promotes germination. And so the three best tactics that I found for these would be nicking the seed coat with a knife or sandpaper or boiling the seeds. And that's pretty general for most of these wildflowers. Those are kind of the best methods. But you only want to scarify these seeds if you're going to do it and water them pretty adequately in the first year. Otherwise, again, those mid-September rains really germinate that seed. They need a lot of extra water in that first year to germination. Beyond this, if you're having a little bit of trouble, so a fun fact not mentioned on this is that bluebonnets are actually related or a type of legume. And so they have some rhizobium activity in the soil. And so if you are having trouble growing them, pulling up a plant and checking the roots for nodules, so those little balls on the roots, is a great way to see if they're having that activity. And if they're not, an easy way to mediate that is to buy some rhizobium off the internet, and you can apply it as a pre-seed treatment, or you can apply it to the soil and then keep checking it and wait for improvement. A little bit more that can help is raking the seed, and hand broadcasting in general is said to be the best method for planting wildflower seeds, and especially bluebonnets. And they'll take about 6 to 8 weeks to mature after flowering. And as you can see, they bloom from March to May. And so after the 6 to 8 weeks, you'll be safe to either harvest the seed if you'd like to, or you can kind of mow them down at this point and they'll reseed themselves naturally, which is the case with this and with Indian paintbrushes. They're pretty good at reseeding themselves by being mowed down. And a fun fact about the bluebonnet, we all know it's the state flower, but in 1901, it actually beat out the cotton boll as our state flower. There was a lot of people that thought the cotton boll better represented Texas, but the blue color and the beauty of the bluebonnet helped it win out against that cotton boll. So next up is our Indian paintbrush. It's also referred to as a Texas paintbrush. These can be cream or yellow, purple, or the typical red and orange that you see. And you want to plant these from August to December. And a lot of times they have trouble sprouting. And so the earlier you plant them, the better outcome you'll probably have. The best time to plant is when your soil is about 60 degrees, and you'll probably see the best germination. But don't be alarmed if you don't see flowering right away, or you don't see germination right away. Like I said, sometimes it takes a little bit longer for them to start to develop. And then you want to really keep the soil moist also on this for the first year. It'll promote that growth, but you don't want to over water it because it'll cause powdery mildew. And then these you may not see blooms in the first year. Usually they spend the first year developing their rosette. And in the second year, they'll begin blooming. So if you don't see the beautiful color that you want, don't get discouraged. It will come. It will reseed itself, just like the bluebonnet, but it is recommended that if you'd like a pretty established presence of paintbrushes, that you replant to kind of support that until you have the kind of population that you want in your garden. And to harvest these, you want to harvest the pods when they turn brown, and you can place them in a paper bag to dry and shake the paper bag every so often. And then once you have dry seed, you want to store it in a cool, dry place so you're ready to plant them for the next year. And our fun fact about Indian paintbrushes is they can actually be considered parasitic, which is with the presence of a hostelria. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's a little tube that can suck nutrients from plants surrounding it. And so it's important to research what works well with Indian paintbrushes. So obviously you see a lot of Indian blanket and bluebonnets with them on the side of the road. They do pretty well with those, but also giving them space to grow in your wildflower meadow is a great idea. It gives them plenty of nutrients in their own space, so they're not trying to suck out of other plants. So next up is our Indian blanket. And you plant these generally spring to fall. They're pretty adaptable, so you can plant them at any time and they'll really do well for you. They're also called fire wheels. And part of this was the way that they look and how they made a blanket, which is their common name. And so you want to keep these beds pretty moist until germination as well. And they reseed by themselves very well. So once you have them in the ground, you really don't need to replant them. And the best method for planting in these is also seed. And they will flower in the first year, unlike the Indian paintbrushes. You would probably want to stratify these sow the seeds in the first 30 days before planting. It'll help improve germination rapidly. So these will also take a while to sprout, so don't be alarmed if you don't see sprouting right away. And then they're really great for attracting bees and butterflies, specifically the bordered patch butterflies. So if that's something you're interested in having in your meadow, this would be a great addition. So these are the state flower of Oklahoma due to their roots in the Native American culture. Next up, we've got our purple coneflower, and you want to plant these as seeds in the fall or as transplants after the last frost in March. And you definitely want to till these seeds as well prior to planting. Usually an 8 to 10 week chilling period is good for these. And so they need a little bit longer. So, we said the Indian blankets, they need about 30 days, and then these need 10 weeks. So they definitely need that cooler time, which means if you're not going to kill them, planting them earlier in the fall is better, so that they have time to have that frost break their seed dormancy. And you also will want to make sure that they have moist soil the first year, as with the other ones, but these do pretty well in poor soil. So even if you don't, they're pretty resilient. And you can also replant these through root divisions and starting in the fall, but you only want to do this on plants that are about 3 years old. Otherwise their roots aren't developed enough to be able to do the root divisions on. These are very drought resistant and they thrive in hot summers, which is perfect here in Texas. And just as the others, they bloom during the summer months. And these can take up to 2 years, like the Indian paintbrush, to produce your first bloom. And they need maybe a little bit of fertilization in the springtime. Generally, wildflowers don't do well with fertilization. They'll make the stems kind of leggy and the petals more sparse. But if you put a little bit in the spring for these, it really does well for them. And so our fun fact for purple coneflowers is they were first called thirst plants because of their roots. So Native Americans used their roots to cure thirst when there wasn't water around. And next up, we have the goldeneye phlox. And you want to plant these just as the purple coneflower in the fall or after the last frost. Seeds in the fall and transplants in the last frost. You want to till the seeds prior to planting. These don't really have as much of a tilling requirement. So kind of do it at your discretion. 30 days is a good amount of time to till them. And you can also take root cuttings later on in the season, or if you have transplants, once they're mature enough, you can take root cuttings in the winter and they'll grow into the young plants by summer. You really want to keep the soil moist with these. They don't appreciate drought very much. And so they need that moisture to keep them alive. And a good tip for these, if you're having trouble growing them, is to put a little bit of organic matter or a little bit of mulch around them, and it should help them come up a little bit. And they definitely, if you've had these in your yard, grow in clumps. And so about every 3 or 4 years, you probably want to cut them back and separate them if you can a little bit. And so they're very similar to the Drummond phlox, except they're yellow thinners. And so if that's another native wildflower that can be grown here. And so if you want the same color without the yellow, or maybe both, this would be another great flower to look into. And so contrary to popular belief, these were not named after the goldeneye James Bond movie. They're named after that golden eye right in the middle of the flower. And next up is our large buttercup. And so this one is really based on the family that I'm going to talk about how you plant, because they're all very similar. So most of the family, especially this one that you see, are golden yellow, but they can also be pink, white, red, or orange. And so these are grown through both seeds and roots, but the seeds are really hard to grow. So I would recommend planting transplants in the early spring. And then once your plants are mature enough, again, probably you want to give them a few years to mature, you can take root cuttings on these and plant them in early spring. And you actually want to fertilize these as well, about every month for the first year or so. That'll help a lot with flowering and germination. And then you want to water these well too. Just as the goldeneye phlox, they're not very drought loving. And so they need that moist soil, topsoil. And these also can be in partial shade, which is a little different from the others because most require full sun. And so if you have a little bit of a shady area, this would be a great addition. And then their family name in Latin means little frog. And this is very fitting for this family of wildflowers because they grow typically near streams and ponds. And so they were said to grow up. So next up
You
is
didn't set it
our,
wrong.
sorry,
No. You've got delay cook up here.
so our next up is prairie verbena, and these are very good performers. They're actually recommended for this area because they will bloom almost the whole year, and they're pretty deer resistant, which is great for this area. Of course, you want to plant these as transplants in March to early April, and you really want to gather seeds from them once they're established and plant them in the fall to kind of support that growth period. These are also a partial shade or a full sun, but they can withstand both, and they have very low water requirements. So once they're growing, you really don't need to water them unless you're going through a little bit of a dry spell, or else you could promote powdery mildew on them. And they will spread on their own, so they'll reseed themselves if you don't want to collect seeds. But it may be helpful in the first few years just to establish that population that you want. And they grow really well with purple coneflowers. And so those would be two really beautiful flowers to have in your garden. We also have a lot of these around my house, so we see them all the time. And then a fun fact, the Spanish name Moradilla means little purple one. And so it represents the flower very well. Next up is our antelope horn. And so again, I'm going to be talking kind of about milkweed as a family, but specifically about antelope horns in this context, because I got some questions about it in our question box. And so when you're planting, some of the biggest mistakes people make when planting these are, one, you don't want to plant them in the spring. They really need to be planted in September to November as seeds, or they won't do well. And then secondly, you don't want to plant these indoors or in containers and let them grow to transplant. They also won't do very well with that. That kind of goes into planting them in the springtime. And these are a 3-year flower, so don't be discouraged. From what I've seen and read, a lot of times people will get discouraged the first year because they'll see this tiny plant and they think they failed at raising the milkweed, but that's because that first year it's building up its taproot, and so it needs a small amount on top to be able to put all this energy towards the taproots on the bottom. And in that first year, you may see a little bit of delayed sprouting. They do have a little bit of trouble sprouting, and so if you don't see them right when they're supposed to be sprouting up, don't fret, wait a little bit. They should come up after a while, or some of the seeds should come up. And so the second year, you'll usually see foliage that looks a lot like the milkweed, but you won't quite see bloom. And then your third year, you should see flowers, and then you can harvest the seeds. So another mistake that some people make when trying to plant these is harvesting seeds too early off of the existing plants. So you want your pod to be very dry and splitting before you harvest these seeds. Or you might not have as good of success when you're planting those seeds. And then you want to till these seeds before planting. The longer, probably the better. So maybe not 8 to 10 weeks, but probably more than a month. And you don't want to spray these. So they're a little rarer than the other wildflowers in that one, they're our monarch food. And so if you spray them, you can damage the monarch. And so you don't want to do that. And then also they're very sensitive, so spraying them can sometimes harm them. And so an alternative to that, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, is spraying with soapy water or adding soap and vinegar and water and spray them with that. And these can also be partial sun. They prefer full sun, but they can be partial. And so this I found really neat as a fun fact. During World War II, the silk from the seeds of the milkweed was used for regular and aviation life jackets because the milkweed seed silk is 5 to 6 times stronger than the typical silk that we use. So next we're going to discuss wine cups, and these are very popular around here. They need cold tilling before you plant them, and the seeds should be planted in October to November. It's a pretty tight window. Planting them any earlier, any later, you may not see as good of success. But if you want to till them and then start them in pots inside, that is very highly recommended, and then plant them in the early springtime. You can do it in the fall, but early springtime is probably better. You want to replant these plants when the soil is about 60 degrees. That's the best time for them, and that's when they'll survive the best. And then damaging the seed core a little bit on these is pretty good too, but because of the nature of the seeds, the best way to do that for the wine cup is through the boiling method. So tilling them for a few hours and then pouring boiling water on them for a couple seconds. And this will encourage higher germination rates in your field. So if you've had trouble with high germination just through straight planting before, this could really help. And so they need full to partial sun, and you don't want to overwater these. They do not like extra water. You want to make sure the soil is dry in between waterings. And then you can really do the transplant, like I said, at any time, fall or early spring. Early spring is better, but just don't do it in the summer because it's way too hot for them and they won't germinate very well. But these reseed very easily once they're established. So if you keep them happy the first year, they'll be pretty much good to go for the rest of the season. And so these actually have tubers that taste like sweet potatoes, raw or cooked, which is pretty interesting. I've never had a wine cup tuber, but I would like to try one now. And so next up, we're gonna look at the pink evening primrose. And so these can actually go from white to a rose pink, and they are a 2-year producing flower, and they are also known as pink ladies. And so these are pretty easy to grow from seed. You want to plant them in a late fall, so time is around September or early November. They're pretty hardy and adaptable, so care is pretty much a minimum for these. As long as you have them in full summer or full sun and rocky soil textures, they do well. And if you water them weekly in that first year, they'll do well, and then back off after that, and they'll be good to go. They reproduce their seeds and their stolons, so they multiply very quickly. So knowing that when you plant these is important because they will take over your garden if you're not careful. You do want to prune these after every season to make sure they stay healthy. And the fun fact for these is the white pink evening primrose flowers are actually found commonly in Kimball, Edwards, and Rio counties. So next, I think my headphones aside. So can y'all still hear me?
We can hear you, Caitlin.
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sorry. Next up is our cedar sage. And these are pretty minimal plants too. And they're pretty small, contrary to what you think looking at the picture, but they're really beautiful wildflowers to have. And so they do really well in shade, especially under trees, hence the cedar sage name. And so you want to plant them as seeds in late August to early September, so your fall time. And I mean, you really don't need to manage them very much. They should pretty much bloom on their own, and they reseed very easily. So once you have them established, they'll keep going. And so their fun fact is their flowers are actually edible, and they have a very warm, sweet flavor when you add them into any recipes. So next is our lantanas. So the one on the screen is the Texas lantana, but this is pretty general to their whole family. These can be yellow, orange, red, pink, many other colors, white, pretty much anything you can think of. And for these, planting transplants in mid to late spring is the best method. And once the frosts have passed, and they are heat-loving plants. So you do want to plant them when the soil is about 60 degrees, but after that, you don't need to worry much about watering except to keep them alive in the first year. And after that, just heavy drought, put some water on there, but beyond that, they'll do pretty good. A light fertilizer the first spring will be helpful to help them promote flower production, but don't do too much because that will prohibit flower production. So you want to do about the recommended amount and then leave it after the first spring. And then you, like I said, don't need to water, and then water very regularly after the first year. And then you can propagate these through cuttings in midsummer to late fall, and then transplant them later on. And you want to propagate them through shoot cuttings, and then they will take about 40 to 60 days to germinate once planted. And then all parts of the lantana are poisonous if ingested, so be aware of that with your pets. And then the name and their scientific name with Heridia actually refers to the smell of the leaves. They thought they smelled so horrid that they named it Heridia. And next is our Engelmann daisy, and this will be our last one. And these are also called cut leaf daisies. And you want to plant these as seeds from late summer to early fall, the late summer being preferable. And then you'll have blooms from April to July. And these have a very deep taproot, so they're good at pulling in water and nutrients from the soil, so they really don't require much attention once you have them established. Just like the others, you want to keep a good moist soil the first year, and make sure that they have all the nutrients they need. And so the flowers on the Engelmann daisies will actually close in intense heat to keep themselves from dying. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And so another fact that I didn't mention at the top, but as you saw, most of these, their bloom is throughout the summertime. So they usually start around April or May and go to late summer or until the first frost of the year. But if you want to extend that flowering time a little bit, if you de-hedge the flowers, it'll make the plants bushier, and it'll also, at most times, extend their growth. I'm not sure about them in bluebonnets or Indian paintbrushes, but some of the flower types like the daisy, the Engelmann daisy, or the buttercup, or the lantanas, this will promote a longer bloom period for them. So that's helpful to know. And so next up in our discussion is we're going to play a little game of Jeopardy based on the information I just gave you. So I'm going to stop sharing this really quick and move in.
And Caitlin, just to remind everybody, if they want to chime in, they might need to unmute themselves. Just to remember that.
Yes, if you want to chime in, which we'll need some timing in, you'll have to unmute yourself. So let's see. Can everyone see the Jeopardy screen?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 4 categories. Name that flower, which will be pictures and identifications from the pictures in the slideshow, and then some of the alternative names I gave you for some of the wildflowers, and then their fun facts, and then a little bit about the plant necessities that we talked about. So that'll be like growing period, blooming period, that kind of thing.
I don't know how long.
So who wants to go first?
Would like name that flower for 100.
All righty.
Oh, that's a tough
I
one.
answer, anybody?
What's a bluebonnet?
Yes, correct.
Okay, name that flower for 200. Indian paintbrush.
Sorry.
Yes.
What is an Indian paintbrush? Are we supposed to ask the question?
Yeah.
Yes, you can
That's the
do
rule.
it as the others will be phrased as a question, but these I just put the name.
How about fun facts for 100?
Oh,
Oh,
What is
Indian paint blanket.
Indian blanket?
Yeah, the Indian blanket. Yeah.
Correct.
oh, didn't know that.
What do you want, Don? Alternative names for 100?
This is another name for your Indian paintbrush.
What is Gallardia? Wheel.
Yes, so it's not the scientific name, it's just another common name.
What is fire wheel?
Texas paintbrush?
Can you say
Oh,
that again?
sorry.
Sorry.
What is Texas paintbrush?
Correct.
Oh, wow. Yay, you got it. Woo. Well, alternative names for 200.
And this is another name for cedar sage, which this is actually a trick one because I didn't actually say it, but it has to do with the color.
What is red sage?
Red sage.
Scarlet sage.
Scarlet.
Scarlet sage is correct.
Oh, good one. Who got that one? Lynn?
No.
Okay, let's go all the way down. Plant needs for 500.
This is the season for wildflower blooming, the general season,
What is spring?
spring to summer. Yes.
Summer. Oh, summer. All right.
Okay, name that flower for 500. Oh,
Ooh,
those
the
are the Aggie
A&M.
paintbrushes. The Aggie
Yeah,
bluebonnets. The Aggie maroon bluebonnets.
That is correct.
Whoop.
That was a trick one. I didn't know if I'd get that.
Fun facts for 200.
What is
The moradilla that was,
Verbena.
yeah.
That's correct. Prairie verbena.
alternative names for 300?
This is another name for the Engelmann daisy.
What is cutleaf daisy?
Correct.
Man, that was a good one. Fun facts for 500.
These flowers are said to taste like sweet potatoes.
Oh, the wine cup.
Yes.
What is the wine cup? What is a wine cup? Excuse me.
Plant necessities for 100.
This is a light requirement for most wildflowers.
Full sun.
Little sun.
Correct.
200.
This is the general planting time for wildflower seeds.
Fall. Fall. What is fall?
Fall, yes. August to October.
Oh, that's thoughtful.
But fall is close enough.
Fun facts for 300.
During World War II, this flower seed silk was used to make life jackets.
What is antelope milkweed? Asclepias.
Yeah.
Antelope horn, sorry. Alternative names for 500.
Woo.
Big money, big money. The alternative names for 500.
we lose her?
She's not hearing you. She's not hearing you.
Caitlin, are you there?
Caitlin, up there?
Just pick them. Yeah, we've lost you.
Can you hear us, Caitlin?
Hello.
Hello?
We hear you.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. Hold on just a second. Okay, can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, my headphones are going in and out. So who's next? Sorry.
Alternative names for 500.
Perfect. Another name for the pink evening primrose.
Edwardian.
Well, I grew up in South Texas and they were called buttercups.
Buttercups is a good one, but that wasn't quite what I was looking for.
What are
Yellow.
lady primroses?
Yeah, pink lady.
Lady.
Pink
Oh.
ladies, pink ladies.
Ah,
Pink lady.
Good name.
Yes,
It
very
is.
descriptive. You got that one.
Alternative names for 400.
Another name for an Indian blanket.
What is fire?
fire wheel.
Yes, correct.
Firewheels, yeah. Firewheels, yeah.
Name that flower for 400.
Yellow
Passion
passion
flower.
Yellow
flower.
passion flower.
Yes.
That's what she called it first.
Okay,
Okay,
name
name that flower for 300.
And the picture didn't work.
Lantana.
Texas
Yeah.
lantana.
What
Texas
is Texas
lantana.
lantana?
Yeah, oh.
Fun facts for 400.
This flower's scientific name reflects the horrid smell of its leaves.
Texas lantana again.
Correct.
Ah, do they smell hard? I hadn't noticed.
Plant necessities, 300.
This is the general fertilization requirement for wildflowers.
None.
What is none?
What is none?
What is do not fertilize? And then our last one, this is the general water requirements for wildflowers.
Low or none.
Very low.
Very low, yes.
Once
Low
established.
for establishment, then low water.
Mhm.
Very good.
Ah, we did pay attention, didn't we? All right.
Fun.
And so I've got a few more slides. If I can get back to them.
I have a question.
Oh, does someone have a question?
Yeah, like on some of the flowers that have different names, is it because the alkaline of the soil changes the color, or they're the same plant, different colors? Is that right?
Some of them can, and then some of them it's due to just breeding efforts in the last few years. They've really tried to diversify flower coloring. It's kind of their new thing in breeding programs across the nation. And that's especially the case with the lantana and the bluebonnet. Most of their colors have come from breeding efforts.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So now I'm going to move in to some of the planting basics with the wildflowers. And so I had a few questions on where to get seeds and where to get transplants, especially milkweed seeds and transplants. And so milkweed seeds can be purchased at the Douglas King Seed in San Antonio, Texas, or the David's Garden Seeder online, or the Wild Seed Farm. And then transplants can also be purchased from Wild Seed Farms in Fredericksburg.
Seed farm.
So a little bit about what we've already talked about. Wildflowers should be planted as seeds in late summer to early fall. And so it's going from about August to October in most instances. And you want to plant about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch distributed by hand or broadcast. And so a good kind of method that I like to go by is when we're planting cottonseed. We like it. I don't know if y'all can. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can show you on my screen. Can y'all see me on your screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So when we're planting cotton, we like it to be a little above the first knuckle, because the seed's small and we want it about an inch in the ground. And so a good method is doing, maybe the tip of your finger will be about 1/4 of an inch. And so that's easier than having to measure if none of you have ever heard of that before. So
Good tip.
we recommend about 20 feet per square foot for wildflowers. Some are more, some are less, but this is a pretty general requirement. It gives them plenty of room to grow. And then most want full sunlight to some partial sunlight. So you want the soil to be moist when preparing to plant. And so you either want to wait for a rain event or wet your soil lightly through sprinklers and wait 2 or 3 days and then rake up the area. Another tip that can help is spreading some small rocks. Most wildflowers really like rocky soils. And so having those small rocks to kind of grow around are really good for them. And then some wildflowers may need to be scarified or stratified, so they need to have damage to their seed coat, or they might need to be tilled. Some of the ones I've shown are ones we talked about, meaning that the seeds you see are antelope corn seeds, and those definitely need some damage to their seed coat. Those are the pods, but they need some damage to their seed coat. Excuse me, sorry. And then blue bonnets as well. And so, as we discussed, watering, you want to keep your seed bed wetted until seedlings appear. And then after that, you might want to water in dry spells or maybe once every few weeks, but they should be pretty established. And you want to thin a little bit when they're coming up, and you can do this by hand, or an easier way is dragging a rake through your seeded areas, and it'll take out every other plant and give them plenty of room to grow and establish. And then once the majority of your seed is mature, you want to collect them in paper bags. So I know this was a question, how can we go out and collect wildflower seeds? And a great method for this is the same as you would be doing them in your garden, is you can take either the head off, you can clip it with scissors, or you can take the pods and clip them when they're cracked. And you'll put the pods upside down in the bag or the heads in the bag and take it. And then once it's all the seeds in there, you want to leave the bag and allow it to dry and shake it ever so often just to make sure none of them are sitting in moisture, and allow them to sit in a cool, dry place so there's no moisture that's causing germination before you want to plant them. And now we're going to move into troubleshooting garden problems. And so some of these methods that I'm going to say are going to seem pretty intuitive. And so bear with me. These are just methods we use in agronomy to really diagnose plant problems. So the thing we always say is monitor, investigate, identify, and then establish the treatment. So monitoring, this is easily done by doing a daily walk around. And identifying areas in your field that are needing, or your garden that are needing to be looked at. And so this can be, you see in this bluebonnet field, you have a little bit of a bare spot. So, that would be something you would want to investigate. Why is it bare? And then, maybe you have a flower or two that's wilting and you want to investigate, why is it wilting? And so next you're going to investigate. And so a big part of this is looking at where these symptoms are coming from. So a common problem we have in crop science is in your field, you'll see pretty regular spots that are bare. And so that can indicate maybe a planting problem. But if you see one big spot that's bare and nothing else, then that could be a soil fertility problem. That could be a nutrition problem. It could be a disease problem. And so you really want to see what's going on around the plants and the areas that are infected or that have problems. And then you also want to pick any plant. So if you have one individual plant with something going on, that could be just a nutrition deficiency in that plant. Or if you have multiple exhibiting the same symptoms, maybe that's a disease, because they can look similar when you're looking at the plant. And then other indications that you could look for is looking on the leaves of the flowers. And so, like we're about to discuss, sometimes symptoms occur in older flowers or not flowers, older leaves or younger leaves. And so if you can kind of tell on your flowers where those symptoms are occurring, you can more accurately diagnose the problem in your garden. And so one of these steps is nutrition deficiencies. And so this is a great little figure to show generally what these will look like. So there are some wildflowers that will have these deficiencies because they're being grown in poor soil. And so you can help by a light fertilization. And so you see at the top, we have a pretty healthy green leaf. It's nice and shiny. It's showing everything that you would normally see in a wildflower leaf. And then when you have the yellowing on the outer layers or the outer margins of the leaf, and on older leaves, that could indicate some nitrogen deficiency. And this will be the same in just even outside of wildflowers showing any flowers. And then the phosphorus, you see a little bit of yellowing on older leaves, but normally they'll start to die. And so you see these little areas of dying off leaf on the margins, and eventually that leaf will die completely. And so it's a little different than nitrogen because you're seeing those dead areas. And then moving on to potassium deficiency, if you look at the younger leaves, that's where this potassium deficiency will show up. So the first three we looked at, like I said, are older leaves. And so they'll be the ones towards the bottom. And then the young leaves towards the top, the potassium will show yellowing on the edges, but it will also show some bronzing on the outside. And so we have a lot of diseases in flowers and plants in general that have this bronzing characteristic. So seeing that it's on young leaves specifically, and seeing that the yellowing on the outside and not the whole leaf necessarily, and that the bronzing is small spotting and not consistent throughout the whole leaf, will tell you it's potassium. And then iron, it'll be a little bit paler in color. And so actually, interestingly enough, this can exhibit in flowers sometimes too. We have some flowers right outside our house. They're verbenias, and they have, some are dark purple, and then some are a light, almost pale purple. And so that could be an indication of an iron deficiency. You're seeing that lightening of the color. And then that one's also in younger leaves. And then magnesium is also in younger leaves and newer leaves, and older leaves, sorry. And then the difference between iron is you'll see a darkness on the margins of the leaf, but the inside will turn a pale color, and the veins will be dark as well with the margins. And so they are pretty distinctive, as you can tell from the figure, but sometimes when you're looking, they can get a little looking like one another. So you have to be pretty thorough in what you're looking at, and making sure you're looking top versus bottom, and are there multiple flowers with this? And then other symptoms, as I'm sure y'all have seen in your fields or in your gardens, is having, ragged edges from insects nibbling on them, seeing eggs, seeing holes from caterpillars, and then also identifying diseases. So these will normally come up as either black or brown patches on the leaf, or you'll see a wilting of the flower. And then, as we talked about, general nutrition, so yellowing, browning, or wilting of the leaf. And so once you've identified these symptoms, where they're at, how many areas of your garden are looking like this, you can come up with a treatment plan. And based on your symptoms, that's how you decide this treatment plan. But you really want to research your options. So say you find aphids on your milkweed, and you aren't sure what to do because you don't want to spray insecticide to kill them. Well, your first thing is you could go online and Google how to kill aphids on milkweeds, obviously. And probably what's going to come up is trying a less invasive approach. So we call it integrated pest management. And so that'll be killing off the aphids with your fingers. And so you can just run it down the stem, but you want to be careful not to knock out caterpillar eggs for the monarch. So you want to make sure you're just squishing the aphids. And then if you still see aphids on your milkweed, a great way to try next would be to spray the soapy solution and then wait. And so you always want to wait after each approach because you want to see the kind of progress you made. So it may not be overnight that these, just these columns disappear. And so say your soapy water doesn't work, well, then you may want to try a more aggressive approach like introducing beneficial insects. So since a typical insecticide isn't recommended for milkweed, you could introduce something like the green lacefly or ladybugs that will actually eat the aphids on your plant, and that would improve the health of the plant. And so these are just, very simple ways to kind of tell what's going on in your wildflower garden if you know you've done all the right planting approaches and you're seeing some kind of symptoms that you don't want. And so now I'm going to open the floor to questions.
Yes, Caitlin, thank you so much for all this information. I had a question about the soil prep before you seed. If there is grass where you want to seed wildflowers, what do you have to do? Do you have to loosen the grass or?
I would loosen the grass a little bit because the wildflowers really like that loose soil texture that comes with having rocky soils. And so maybe running a rake through it, wetting it, or running a rake through it would help loosen that grass up a little bit. The rake might rake the grass up, so you may run into that problem, but it'll help the wildflowers grow a little bit better.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'd like to grow basket flowers. Can you talk about those?
Basket flowers. I actually don't know a whole lot about basket flowers, but I can do some reading and get and email you if you send me your email. I'd rather do that than give you some false information.
Okay. Okay. Do we have your email?
I can send out. So I was going to say I showed one of the books I used at the top of the presentation. So I actually used 4, and this goes with my email. But the Wildflowers of the Texas Hill Country, and then I used Southwestern and Texas Wildflowers, and then Texas Wildflowers, and then some of the care information I got from Native Plants for Southwestern Landscape, and then obviously the Central Texas Gardener site. So I didn't put references up on here because I have a whole Word document for them. And so if y'all would like, I can do that along with my email for any questions that may come up after the presentation.
I have a question on the buggies. Neem oil, would that be okay to use?
Would what be okay to use? Sorry.
Neem oil?
Yes, that would be okay to use. Really, any other anything other than milkweed, you can use insecticides on, but for the milkweed, the oil would be good. And then for other disease and insect control, we've also used, obviously this is on crops, but it would probably work just as well on the flowers, would be orange oil, or some fish oils work really well at
Yeah, I have the orange.
Yeah, some of the orange oils, but the fish oil, it smells really bad, but we found it works pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I've been babying a passiflora and I lost it finally after 2 years. I couldn't, it was just getting bugs or this, it just wouldn't grow.
Yeah, it's so finicky how that can work, and it's hard when you know, can't apply those insecticides to try and mitigate that problem. But
I was
organic
picking them off.
Caitlin, would you be up for putting your email address in the chat? So if people have questions a little bit later, they could send them to you?
Of course.
That'd be great.
And I will say, so I have a university email. If I don't respond, sometimes mail gets sent to my junk inbox if it's not a university email. So if I don't respond, email it to me again. Or I know Lynn's email is in my inbox. And so if you reach out to her, if I haven't responded, I'll go check. I'll try and keep an eye on my spam box there just in case. And thank you for the great presentation. I really appreciate y'all having me on this meeting. It's been really fun getting to.
It's really wonderful.
Caitlin,
Fun for
thank
us
you
too.
great
so much.
presentation.
It's just amazing. Thank you very much. And I would also like to thank Chris and Betsy who made this possible.
Thanks,
Can I ask-
Caitlin.
We will be back on May 10th. I believe.
Patrick,
Yes,
I'd like, before we adjourn, I'd like to say that Garen and I will match any more donations to the scholarship fund up to $1,250. If we can get that amount, we'll end up with enough for a full scholarship.
Yeah, the chapter gets up $1,250 and we do the other half.
Thank you guys so much. That is very generous of you. We appreciate it.
If anyone
Yes, we
wants
do.
information about donations, my email is hood@utexas.edu.
They'll write it in the chat.
U as in the letter U or YOU?
The letter U, EDU. Oh, U, yeah, U, Texas is also the letter U.
Got it.
And
I have a farm.
I will get information for those who want to write a check directly and let you know how it should be sent.
sounds wonderful. Thank you all.
Okay.
Well,
Are we
good
done?
night, and we'll see you in a month.
Good night, friends.
Bye.